Hi, everyone. So I'm Shelley Cox from Montoux. With me, I've got my colleague, Stephen Carlin from Montoux, and Ewen Tweedie and Peter Heffernan from PwC. And we're having a chat today around a pricing insights survey that we put out into the protection industry to understand the different capabilities or spectrum of capability of pricing capability in the market. And today we're going to have a chat around some of those findings. So I'll ask the first question. So to the floor, from the survey results, what stood out or surprised you the most in terms of what came back?
I'll have a go at this one first then, Shelley. So Peter Heffernan, PwC, I'm a director in our life actuarial practice, 25 years experience in insurance and actuarial stuff. So I spend a lot of my time, one thing that I do is auditing companies, and I spend a lot of time working with financial reporting teams, and they're not under-resourced. There's a lot of resource thrown at getting the financial reporting results out in time. Contrast this with some of the results from this survey. The biggest barrier to some of this is resources, right? So on the life insurance side, there's some, it was on one of the slides saying the biggest barrier that we have is we just don't have enough resources. And that makes me wonder, because there's a lot of people in some of these life insurance companies, a lot of staff, and yet they're not focused on pricing, which suggests to me that something has got a bit disconnected. They don't necessarily see there's value in pricing. They maybe think that pricing is something that they don't need to focus on. It struck me as just a little bit odd.
So I'm Ewan, I work with Peter at PwC. So that is an interesting point, and it sort of contrasts a little with some of the pricing strategy responses in the survey too, where a lot of companies are noting that they've got or at least feel that they've got a clear pricing strategy that's well defined and understood throughout the business. So it sounds like perhaps at the board level, perhaps maybe they do feel that they are focusing on pricing, but that's not necessarily how it's felt on the ground, and that under resourcing is proving to be a bit of a pressure on pricing teams.
One of the things that stood out for me was really the spread that we saw in the answers, both in terms of the resources that have to go into each pricing cycle, and then how quickly different companies can run the cycle. So I think at the sort of quickest end of the market, it might be 2, 3, 4 days of total effort that allow them to turn around pricing updates in a day or two. At the other end of the spectrum, the resources required can be sort of 2, 3 months of total effort, and that obviously acts as a big limitation on the frequency of repricing, where you might only see that happening once a year or even less in some cases. And I think that will be a reflection of the investment that's gone into the pricing function to date. So where the investment's been made, you have these really quick turnaround times, but maybe in other cases where it hasn't been given the focus or the priority, the kind of kit that's in place means that pricing's quite an onerous process for them.
All took something different out of it.
We did, yeah. So given that that sort of dichotomy or two ends of the spectrum that you talk about, what do you see as some of the key opportunities for improvement within the pricing space, and what sort of value do you think that might create?
I think just picking up from the conversation, one of it has to be speed and automation. So when the front end of the market are pricing weekly with an aspiration to price daily, clearly to compete in that set, there's got to be a degree of automation and speed. And when you think of the value that creates, it's not just an efficiency overhead. If you're able to price weekly or daily, there's less onus on getting it right. And if you're repricing every 6 months, you're going to do a lot of analysis that's going to be out of date as soon as your prices hit the market. So this idea of agility, I think, is really important when that's what the rest of the market are doing, because quite simply, they're going to be operating at a cadence that you're not able to, if you're pricing every 6 months or every year.
So agility is a word I like. I might be being a little bit negative about the life sector here, but it's never struck me as a particularly agile as an agile sector. If we compare it to the non-life sector, non-life pricing is a lot more agile. And again, it's a different beast, and again, it's a different specialism. But I think there's something to be taken from how the non-life sector prices business. And yeah, I mean that's 1 year renewable. It's short term, so there is more scope to reprice it if you get it slightly wrong. But I think there's something to be looked at about how the non-life sector does it compared to life.
Yeah, I think one of the themes for me is really understanding, and obviously this will vary depending on the level of investment so far, but really trying to understand what you're best able to compete on, so what your comparative advantage is. And I think what I'd say we see anecdotally in the results is that often the firms that are looking to compete on price are the ones that probably invested most in the pricing capability. Now, not everyone's going to have the economies of scale or the reinsurance arrangements to compete on a pricing basis. So I think figuring out what the sort of optimal strategy is based on your combination of your product capabilities, your distribution capabilities, and then making sure that you build the pricing function that supports that, and that you're able to operate in the market, you understand where you sit, and you're able to kind of price appropriately for the sector of the market that you're trying to compete in will be quite important.
Yep. Yeah, I think that comparative advantage point of everyone trying to find their sweet spot is coming through more and more.